Now, that's what I call music. 30 tracks with 11 number ones. From Culture Club, Duran Duran, UB40, Kajagoogoo, Paul Young, Phil Collins, Tina Turner, Tracy Ullman, Genesis and Madness. Get Now Now, a double album or cassette in record departments of Woolworth, Tesco, Martin. Now, that's what I call music.
Now that's what I call music too. Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Culture Club. Nick Kershaw. Howard Jones. Ween. 30 of the latest hit singles, including 4 number ones, all on a new double album or cassette. Now that's what I call music too. Out now.
This is it, the pig one. Now that's what I call music 3. 30 original chart hits on one posh double album. The Crucial Collection. Wake me up before you go to me. I'd write this if I were you.
I want to break free. I want to break free.
Now that's what I call music 3. Listen! It's now 4 with Culture Club and Eurythmics. Hey, Audio Marauder with Philip Oakey. Status Quo. And many more. Now that's what I call music 4. Big is back. Now that's what I call music 5. 30 chart-topping hits on one posh double album with Marillion, Phil Collins and Fine Young Cannibals, Kool and the Gang and Strictly Politics, Paul Young, Brian Ferry and the number 1 from Sister Sledge. And even Simple Minds and Duran Duran. Simply Red, U2 and many more. Get Now 5 and make it pig.
The Now label presents its latest collection with Queen. 30 massive hits with Nick Kershaw. Bryan Adams and Tina Turner. And the number 1 from Ferbal Sharkey. Now that's what I call music 6. Feel the quality. The Now label presents its latest collection with Queen. Wham, UB40 and Peter Gabriel. Over 30 chart hits with David Bowie. And the number 1 from Christopher. Now that's what I call music 7. Feel the quality.
Now 8. Starring Duran Duran, Swing Out Sister and Cameo.
Everybody say, when you hear the call, you got to
Debbie Harry, Kim Wilde. And the number 1 from the Communards. 32 top chart hits on the ultimate double album and cassette. Now that's what I call music 8. Get Now 9. Oh yeah! Your own personal hit smile, featuring Freddie Mercury, Genesis, Curiosity Killed the Cat, and Benny King. Jackie Wilson, Bon Jovi, Mental as Anything, and the number 1 from Boy George. 30 top chart hits at your fingertips. Now that's what I call music 9. Now 10. 10.
Pump up the volume, pump up the volume.
Featuring Mars, the Communards. And the number 1 from Tapow. 30 top chart hits on the brilliant double album. Now that's what I call music. 10. Now 11, featuring the Pet Shop Boys. Wet, 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 Mel and Kim, Belinda Carlisle. Tapow, Jermaine Stewart, Billy Ocean.
Out of my dreams.
30 top chart hits with the number 1 from Kylie Minogue. All on the hottest double album in town. Now that's what I call music. 11. Now 12, featuring Sabrina and the number 1 from the Time Lords. The number 1 from S Express. The number 1 from Glenn Medeiros, Salt and Pepper, Push It.
Push it real good.
And the number 1 splash hit from Wet, Wet, Wet. All these and more from the coolest album around. Now that's what I call music. 12. Now we have liftoff. Now 13 flies you to the stars with Salt and Pepper, Robert Palmer. Womack and Womack, Bobby McFerrin. Brian Ferry, Milli Vanilli.
Girl, you know it's true.
Erasure, Brother Beyond. And 3 number 1s from Phil Collins, The Hollies, and Yaz. 32 top chart hits on one astronomic double album. Now that's what I call music. 13. Now 14. Sam Brown, the legendary Roy Orbison. Erasure, Yaz, Phil Collins. And the number 1s from Simple Minds, Mark Almond and Gene Pitney. 32 top chart hits brought together on one great double album. Now that's what I call music. 14. Now 15, featuring the smash number 1 from Soul to Soul. 32 top chart hits. Now that's what I call music. 15. Now 16, featuring Rebel MC and Double Trouble, Technotronic, De La Soul, and Sydney Youngblood. 32 top chart hits. Now that's what I call music. 16. Now 17 with Adamski, the chart-topping single from the number 1 album. Now 17, Step on It. Now 18 brings you the massive number 1 from the Righteous Brothers. The Beautiful South, Jimmy Somerville. Elton John, Phil Collins, Robert Palmer, UB40. Tina Turner, the latest from Soul to Soul, Kim Appleby. 32 top chart hits. Now that's what I call music.
You can reach me by caravan.
Now 19, 34 massive tracks with the stunning Oleta Adams, Robert Palmer, Seal, Stevie B, Free, and Chris Rea. 34 top chart hits, including 6 number 1s. Now that's what I call music. Now 20.
Y'all ready for this?
35 top chart hits from Color Me Bad, 2 Unlimited, and Prince. Erasure, Kenny Thomas, and Simply Red. The number 1 from U2, Rosala, Lisa Stansfield, and Salt and Pepper.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Scorpions, Zoe, Enya, and Belinda Carlisle. And of course, the brilliant number 1 from Vic Reeves and the Wonder Stuff. 35 incredible top chart hits. Now that's what I call music. 20. Now 21. Packed with 36 of the biggest hits around from Simply Red, Crowded House, and Genesis. The number 1s from Wet, Wet, Wet and Queen. Shanice, Madness and Right Said Fred. Mr. Big, Curtis Stigers and the #1 smash from Shakespeare's Sister. 36 incredible top chart hits. Now 21. That's what I call music. Now 22. 34 of the biggest hits around. Now 22. That's what I call music. Now 23, the #1 album with John Cicada. The #1 hit from Charles and Eddie, Simply Red, Undercover, and Billy Ray Cyrus. Now 23 was the #1 from Tasmin Archer. The #1 from The Shaman, plus Rage and Irma Franklin. 39 top chart hits on the #1 album. Now 23, that's what I call music. This is Now 24 with E17, Take That and Subsub. Duran Duran, Anu Lennox, Simply Red and Shabba Ranks. Now 24 with Arrested Development, Lenny Kravitz and Snow. Ugly Kid Joe and the #1 hits from 2 Unlimited, The Bluebells and Shaggy. 37 top chart hits on Now 24. That's what I call music. It's Now 25 with R.E.M. 4 Non-Blondes, Kim Wilde, New Order and the #1 from Gabrielle. 35 chart-topping hits with Danny Minogue, Robin S., Chaka Demus and Pliers. Now 25 with Tina Turner. The #1 from George Michael and Queen, Gloria Gaynor, Freddie Mercury. And the #1 from Ace of Base. It's Now 25. Now that's what I call music. Now 26, 40 of the biggest hits around with the massive #1 from Meatloaf. Dina Carroll and the #1 from UB40. M People, The Shaman, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Culture Beat and the Pet Shop Boys. Belinda Carlisle, Janet Jackson, Frankie Goes to Hollywood and the Spin Doctors. 40 top chart hits. Now 26, that's what I call music. 27 with E17 and D-Ream. 38 of the biggest hits around with Reel to Reel and Ace of Base. Now 27 with Meatloaf and the massive #1 from Chaka Demus and Pliers. Top chart hits from Dina Carroll and Duke. Wendy Moten, Enigma and Culture Beat. The Cranberries and Capella. Now 27, that's what I call music. Now 28 with the massive #1 from Wet Wet Wet. 40 top chart hits from Stiltskin, Ace of Base and All for One. Now 28 with Erasure, Aswad and Let Loose. The smash hits from CJ Lewis and China Black. Dawn Penn, The Grid and the BC-52s. 40 huge chart hits. Now 28, that's what I call music. Now 29, 38 of the biggest hits around with R. Kelly and Cyndi Lauper. Youssou N'Dour and Nena Cherry. Now 29 with Michelle Gale. 38 top chart hits with the massive #1s from Wigfield, Take That and Pato Banton. The Real McCoy, Lisa Loeb, E17 and Corona. Now 29, that's what I call music. It's now 30 with the massive #1 from Cher, Chrissy Hynde and Nena Cherry. Mike and the Mechanics, Freak Power, E17 and Boyzone. 40 of the biggest hits around with Janet Jackson. Now 30 with Scarlett, Ginny Nail and Bobby Brown.
You can play that game.
Eternal and Corona. Bucketheads, Alex Party and the massive #1 from the Out Here Brothers. 40 top chart hits. Now 30, that's what I call music.